Hello everyone, welcome to 10-Minute Tasting. I'm Adam Hanover, store manager at Rose Wharf, your host for the day. It is a beautiful early fall day here in Buffalo, New York. Wait, it's not. It is winter in New England, that is right. Freezing rain, first snowfall of the year last night. Driving winds here down on the waterfront, making me feel like it's October back home in Buffalo, but it is winter in New England and time for a really great hot cup of dark roast coffee here from Starbucks. This is the weather that we live for with our hot coffee here, all right? So I've got my co-host for the day. It's Jennifer Dandrow, shift manager at State Street in downtown Boston. Jennifer, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. Jennifer is Coffee Master. For those of you that don't know Jen, she started at Steam and Kettle in downtown Boston and then came to me right here at Rose Wharf, where she continued her development and actually became Coffee Master certified with me in this very table that we're sitting at right now. I was able to take my first Coffee Master apron and put it around her neck. I'm very proud of Jen's development, and I'm very happy to have her on the show today. So Jen, why don't you introduce us to the coffee that we're tasting today?
So today we're going to be doing Italian roast, which is one of my favorites from my journey. Actually, last year, right before I decided to do Barista Championships, Italian's a coffee that I just fell in love with. Originally, Cafe Verona was always my favorite, but alongside some tastings I did with one of my fellow shift managers, we both just fell in love with the sweetness of this coffee. It's just perfect for this kind of weather. I just love drinking a nice dark roast brewed French press when it's raining or snowing. It just like warms you up.
Excellent. Yeah, so we're going to walk through the steps right now. For those of you that haven't joined the show before, we'll go through the 4 steps of a coffee tasting, and afterwards we'll discuss some interesting notes about the coffee and the method that we brewed it through, and Jen and I will have a nice little chat about that at the end. So Jen, why don't you take us through the first step of our coffee tasting?
All right, first we're going to smell the coffee and pick up that aroma.
This is definitely one of the most aromatic coffees that we have in our lineup.
For sure. What I love that the French press does, it really brings out that roasty flavor to it, and that's something I really appreciate with Starbucks coffee, is that the roast is what's really important to it.
Yeah. So this is the second most dark roasted coffee that we have on our spectrum. So picking up kind of that smoky sweetness off of the coffee is really going to come through with the Italian roast.
Yes. I love how the smokiness just mixes with a nice caramely sweetness as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's just like the best aroma.
So now we're going to move on to step 2. And Jen, what are we going to do?
We're going to slurp it to fully get it over our palate, and that'll really help us pick up all those notes.
Excellent. That is a strong coffee to wake you up on a day like this.
It's just a beautiful way to start the day. If you're like me, I slept in a little bit.
So let's locate this, step 3. Where are you picking this up on your palate, Jen?
So slightly on the sides, but it does have a low acidity, so not too much, but it mostly just streams down the middle of my tongue.
Yeah, and it dissipates fairly quickly too. A lot of us dark roast drinkers are used to Sumatra, Komodo Dragon, Gold Coast, some of the big body coffees that linger on the palate for a long time. The darker you go on the roast spectrum, actually, the lighter the body ends up being in the coffee because you roast some of that body out. So our Italian roast, and more specifically the French roast, you end up with a really less body than you would have from the beans if you roasted a little bit lighter. So yeah, it kind of dissipates off of me. How do you feel about the body?
I really love the body of this coffee just because with French roast, I feel like it fades away too quickly.
Yeah.
But this, you get to pick up all of that flavor, but it's not overly linging like a Sumatra.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Italian roast is classified as a medium body coffee, whereas French roast is a light body coffee. And with this medium body, the best thing about it with Italian roast is you get to keep some of that sweetness on your tongue for just long enough. It's not as intense as a French roast, but it is a little bit more intense than I would like for a full-bodied coffee to stay. So I get it to kind of dissipate just in enough time. I get that good flavor for just long enough before it's too much for me to handle. So yeah, this is a great coffee. What are you picking up for flavor notes now? I noticed you smelled some of that caramely sweetness. Are you picking up any of that flavor?
So first I'm getting like a nice sweetness, like between the chocolate and the caramel. But as it sits a little bit, you actually start to notice a little bit of that spice that you get from Asian Pacific coffees.
Well, that's an interesting point. That's not something that I've ever really noticed in the Italian roast before, but now that you've mentioned it, I do pick up a little, like that subtle kind of spice in there.
I usually pick it up most from the French press, where it gets a little bit different with different brewing methods.
Yeah, that's a good point. So while we're on that topic, it's not something that we've discussed on the show before, but it's something that's kind of near and dear to my heart that I really would like to have a conversation with Jen about, is the brewing method that we've chosen. For those of you who have watched the show every week, you know that we have always done a French press on the show. However, that won't always be the case. There will be days where we have pour over, maybe off the Clover. We might even try something directly off of one of our Bun Digital brewers. However, to this point, we've used the French press every time. And Jen, let's talk about the difference in flavor that you get off of some of these coffees depending on which method we use.
I would love to. So definitely with this French press, you pick up a lot of the roastiness. You get a slight bit of that spice. But then compared with a pour over, you're picking up a lot more of that sweetness. It brings a little bit less of a body, but the caramel and chocolate notes really come out. Although I am picking up chocolate with this, but it's more of like a slight dustiness. And then with a Clover, it's definitely a much cleaner cup.
Yeah.
It helps bring out the body more so than a pour over. Pour over with this coffee is so delicious. It's something that made me fall in love with Italian. But as I kept having it more and more, I appreciate the French press with Italian.
So you would say if you had your choice of having the Italian roast on any method of brewing, would you choose the French press for it?
For sure. It creates such a beautiful body without being overwhelming. But depending on the origin, I would change the brewing method. So for example, French press, I love Latin American coffees. But when you go to a pour over, African coffees come out so beautifully with all of those fruity, citrusy notes.
That's a really good point, Jen. So I know at a lot of our stores that have Clover machines, we typically do our coffee tastings directly off the Clover machine almost every single time. And the Clover machine is great, but it gives you one specific type of taste profile for each coffee. Whereas if you try through different brew methods, if you check your digital passport, there's an option to check which brew method you used for each tasting so that you can tell what's different through each brew method. Personally, my favorite brew method is the pour over. I have a pour over at home, and that's what I use most frequently. But as Jen said that she likes her Latin American coffees on the French press, I prefer my Latin American coffees on the pour over. I tend to find a little bit more acidity off of the pour over and a little bit more of that aromatic scent that I like to pick up off the coffee as it brews off the pour over. So that's my favorite. But Jen, you were a barista champion for District 750. For those of you that don't know, Jen and I competed against each other at the area championships. So Jen, did you use French press or pour over for your coffee tasting at the area championship?
I stuck with the French press. It's one of my favorite brewing methods and something I love talking about.
Cool. Which coffee did you use that day?
That day, I actually believe I did Yukon, which is a little bit different. I feel like a lot of people try and fade away from using that roast or blend. But it's such a specific medium roast. I really like the different flavor notes that it has. Although it is that medium body, it used to be a dark roast, and I like to highlight that now it's become a medium roast, but it's still close to that spectrum.
Very cool. Yeah, for those of you that don't know, when we run out of Christmas blend in our store and people are continuing to ask for it, Yukon is the coffee that we're directed to recommend because it has the closest flavor profile to the Christmas blend of any of our core coffees. So, as Jen highlighted, Yukon might not be the most popular coffee in our lineup, but if we let our customers know that this is the closest thing they're going to find to their favorite seasonal coffee, which sales every year dictate to us that Christmas blend is our most popular seasonal coffee, we can skyrocket Yukon kind of right up that chart. And Jen, Yukon and Italian have kind of a linked history together, don't they?
They do. So actually, Cafe Verona is a mix of Italian and Yukon. So all three are personal favorites of mine.
Yeah.
It's just a certain profile that I enjoy.
Yeah. Allie, hello. Yes, that is some good information that you guys will pick up off of these shows. Yes, for those of you that don't know, feel free to chat into the chat box here. We will answer questions. We're always happy to have other people involved on the show. Jen, anything that you would like to add about Italian roast before we sign off for the day?
I think I just want to talk a little bit about the history. So,
absolutely, go for it.
What I love about coffee is what has really brought people together. So originally, like, everyone would go out for drinks, but that was more of if you were in a higher class and you had the money to afford going out for drinks. But as coffee circulated the world, it became a place where everyone could come together and socialize. So it could be a poor man, a rich man, middle class. And coffee really brought everyone together and brought them away from things such as alcohol or drugs. So it's just nice to know about the experience of coffee.
Very cool. Yeah. It's always good to share a cup of coffee with a passionate partner on the show. So as I say every week, for those of you out there that would like to get involved and share a cup of coffee with me on Periscope, I'm always available. Hit me up on Twitter at SomberDayAdam. Feel free to give me a call, shoot an email to the store, let me know that you'd like to be a part. I will calendar you right in. It is always Taster's Choice every week, so my co-host for the week will always have the chance to pick whichever core coffee they would like to try. And just to plug the next few weeks that we have coming up, next week, District Manager Jose Castro will be on. We will be tasting Puerto Rico Cafe Zumbador, the new reserve. And the week after that, we will be doing beginner latte art practice with District Manager Adam Modzel. Adam is a coffee master, and he is not very confident in his latte art skills despite being really good on bar. So I'm going to be going through some basic build of the flat white to create some latte art with Adam on January 12th. So, Jen, at Jennifer Dandrow on Twitter, feel free to give her a follow. Stop by to the beautiful store on State Street to say hello to her and pick up a clover from her because they now have a clover since their last remodel. And for all of you that watched today, I just want to say thanks. Feel free to check out the replay on my YouTube channel. The links will be up on my Twitter account shortly. Everyone, have a great day. Jen, thanks for being on.
Thank you so much, Adam.